The woman standing at the edge of the graveyard looked like she had been carved from the same red rock that dotted the Arizona Territory landscape, hard and unyielding, with eyes that reflected nothing but emptiness. Victoria Foster had buried her Apache husband 6 months ago, and with him went every shred of faith she had managed to piece together during their 3 years of marriage. Now, in the spring of 1885, she stood alone in a world that despised her for loving a man whose blood ran different from the white settlers who had stolen this land, and she despised that world right back. The small ranch outside Georgetown, a dusty copper mining town nestled in the Gila Valley, had become her prison and her sanctuary all at once. The townsfolk whispered when she rode in for supplies, their eyes following her with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. She was 24 years old and felt ancient, weathered by grief and bitterness in ways that no young woman should be. Victoria had been raised by missionaries after her parents died of fever when she was just 8 years old. Those stern, well-meaning people had taught her about faith and redemption, about grace and forgiveness. Then she had met Takoda, whose name meant friend to everyone, and he had taught her about real love, the kind that transcends the ugly boundaries that men draw between each other. He had been gentle and wise, a hunter who lived between two worlds, trying to maintain peace even as his people were being systematically destroyed. The pneumonia had taken him quickly, too quickly for her to even process what was happening. One week he was healthy and strong, and the next he was burning with fever, his lungs filling with fluid no matter what remedies she tried. She had prayed then, desperately, calling out to the God the missionaries had taught her about, but the only answer she received was the sound of Takoda's final, rattling breath. After that, Victoria stopped praying. She stopped believing in anything except the harsh reality that life was cruel and love was a fool's bargain that only led to devastating loss. The ranch work kept her busy enough during the daylight hours. She had a small herd of cattle, maybe 30 head, and a few horses that needed tending. Takoda had taught her how to care for them, how to read the land and the animals, how to survive in this unforgiving territory. But when night fell, and she was alone in the small adobe house they had built together, the silence became suffocating. It was on a Tuesday morning in late April when Vincent Hayes first rode onto her property. Victoria was mending a section of fence that had come loose during a recent windstorm, her hands wrapped in leather gloves as she hammered a post back into the hard ground. She heard the horse approaching and immediately reached for the rifle she kept propped against a nearby fence post, spinning around with the weapon ready. The man reined in his horse immediately, holding his hands up in a gesture of peace. "Easy there, madam. I mean no harm. Just passing through and wondering if you might spare some water for my horse." Victoria kept the rifle trained on him, her dark eyes assessing. He was tall, lean in the way of men who spent their lives in the saddle, with sun-weathered skin and light brown hair that fell just past his collar beneath a worn hat. His eyes were a striking blue-green like the shallow water in a creek, and they held her gaze without flinching but without aggression either. "Water trough is over there," she said curtly, gesturing with the rifle barrel toward the wooden trough near the barn. "Help yourself and move on." "Much obliged," he said quietly, dismounting with fluid grace. He led his horse, a sturdy roan gelding, over to the trough and let it drink while he stood beside it, not making any sudden moves. Victoria watched him carefully, noting the worn but clean state of his clothes, the well-maintained saddle and tack, the way he spoke softly to his horse as it drank. He wore a gun on his hip but made no move toward it, seemed to understand that she was the one in control here and respected that boundary, When his horse had drunk its fill, he touched the brim of his hat to her. "Thank you kindly, madam. I will be on my way." "You do that," Victoria said, not lowering the rifle until he had mounted up and ridden back down the long drive that led to the main road. She watched him disappear into the dust and heat shimmer, then finally lowered her weapon and returned to her fence mending. But something about the encounter stuck with her throughout the day, the way he had been polite without being condescending, careful without being fearful. It had been a long time since anyone had treated her like a regular human being deserving of basic courtesy. 2 days later, he was back. This time Victoria was in the barn when she heard the approach of hoofbeats. She grabbed a pitchfork instead of her rifle, stepping out into the bright sunlight to see the same man on the same roan horse, this time leading a pack mule loaded with supplies. "You again," she said flatly, gripping the pitchfork. "I told you to move on." "You did," Vincent agreed, stopping a respectful distance away. "And I did move on. Got work at the Triple Star Ranch about 5 miles east of here. The foreman sent me out to check the boundary fences, and I realized that puts me right past your place. Thought I would stop and ask if you might need any help with anything. I noticed the other day you have got a lot of work here for one person." "I manage fine on my own," Victoria said coldly. "Do not need charity." "It would not be charity," Vincent said evenly. "More like being neighborly. I am new to this area, trying to get to know the folks around here. Besides, the Triple Star has more hands than work most days. Foreman would not mind if I spent a few hours helping out a neighbor." "I am not your neighbor," Victoria said. "And I doubt your foreman knows you are talking to an Apache widow." Something shifted in Vincent's expression, but it was not the disgust or contempt she expected. Instead, it looked almost like understanding, maybe even sympathy. "I heard in town about your husband. I am sorry for your loss. Pneumonia is a cruel way to go." "Save your pity," Victoria said harshly. "I do not want it and I do not need it. Now get off my land." Vincent studied her for a long moment and she braced herself for anger or argument. Instead, he simply nodded. "As you wish, madam, but the offer stands if you change your mind. The name is Vincent Hayes, by the way. Most folks call me Vince." He rode off without another word, and Victoria stood there in the barnyard feeling strangely unsettled. His kindness felt like an intrusion, like he was trying to crack open the protective shell she had built around herself. She did not want kindness. Kindness led to connection, and connection led to pain. Better to stay hard and closed off, safe in her isolation. But Vincent Hayes did not seem to understand the concept of giving up. Over the next 2 weeks. He found reasons to ride past her property almost every other day. Sometimes he would stop and ask if she needed anything from town. Other times he would just wave from the road and keep going. He never pushed, never tried to force his presence on her, but he was persistent in the gentlest way possible. Victoria told herself she found it annoying, but the truth was more complicated. There was something about his quiet, steady presence that had begun to chip away at the wall around her heart, even though she resisted it with everything she had. The day everything changed was a scorching afternoon in early May. Victoria was trying to shoe one of her horses, a temperamental mare that Takoda had always handled because she could be difficult. The mare was having none of it, dancing and pulling away every time Victoria tried to lift her hoof. Sweat poured down Victoria's face and frustration built in her chest until she wanted to scream. "Easy, girl. Easy now," she murmured, trying to keep her voice calm even though she felt like throwing the horseshoe across the yard. The mare whinnied and jerked her head, nearly pulling the lead rope out of Victoria's hand. "She is favoring that back left leg. Might have a stone bruise." Victoria spun around to find Vincent sitting on his horse just inside her property line, watching with that same patient expression he always wore. "How long have you been standing there?" she demanded. "Just rode up," Vincent said. He dismounted slowly, keeping his movements calm. "That is Sage, right? Your husband mentioned her once when I saw him in town, said she was smart but stubborn." Victoria felt her throat tighten. "You knew Takoda?" "Not well," Vincent admitted. "Met him a few times at the general store. He was always polite, helped me find some tack I needed when I first came to the territory about a year ago. Seemed like a good man." The unexpected connection to her late husband did something to Victoria's carefully maintained defenses. Her shoulders sagged slightly and she looked away, blinking hard against the sudden sting of tears. "He was the best man I ever knew," she said quietly. Vincent moved closer, still keeping that respectful distance, but near enough that his presence felt solid and real. "Would you like some help with Sage? I am pretty good with horses." Victoria wanted to say no. Every instinct screamed at her to send him away, to maintain her isolation, to not let anyone get close enough to hurt her again. But she was tired, so desperately tired of doing everything alone, of carrying all this weight by herself. "Fine," she said curtly, "but just this once." Vincent approached Sage slowly, speaking in a low, soothing voice. The mare's ears pricked forward, and she settled almost immediately, responding to the calm confidence he projected. He ran his hand down her leg, and she lifted her hoof without fuss, letting him examine it carefully. "There is the problem," he said, pointing to a small stone wedged in the tender part of her frog. "Must be painful. Do you have a hoof pick?" Victoria handed him the tool and watched as he gently removed the stone, then checked the rest of the hoof for damage. His hands were careful and sure, and Sage stood perfectly still for him, all her earlier resistance forgotten. "She should be fine in a few days," Vincent said, straightening up. "Just keep an eye on it to make sure it does not get infected. You might want to soak it in some warm salt water tonight." "I know how to care for my horses," Victoria said, but there was less bite in her tone than usual. "I know you do," Vincent said simply. He handed back the hoof pick and moved to his horse. For once, Victoria did not want him to leave quite so quickly. "Wait," she heard herself say. Vincent turned, his expression open and patient. Victoria swallowed her pride, forcing the words out. "Thank you for helping with Sage." A smile crossed Vincent's face, genuine and warm. "You are welcome. Anytime you need help, Victoria, just ask. Or even if you do not ask, I will probably still show up and offer." He rode away before she could respond, leaving her standing in the barnyard with a strange feeling blooming in her chest. It was not quite hope, but it was something close to it, something she had not felt in 6 long months. After that day, Victoria found herself looking for Vincent's visits rather than dreading them. He started stopping by once or twice a week, always finding some small task to help with. He repaired the roof on her chicken coop when she mentioned it was leaking. He helped her move some heavy feed sacks that had been delivered. He showed her a better way to reinforce her fence posts so they would hold up better in storms. They did not talk much at first. Victoria was not ready for conversation, for the vulnerability that came with sharing pieces of herself. But Vincent seemed content with silence, working alongside her without expecting anything in return. It was a kind of companionship that did not demand, and gradually, Victoria found herself relaxing in his presence. One evening in late May, after they had spent several hours repairing a section of corral fence, Victoria surprised herself by inviting him to stay for supper. The words came out awkward and uncertain, and for a moment she almost took them back. "I would like that very much," Vincent said, and the genuine pleasure in his voice made something warm unfurl in her chest. They ate simple fare, beans and cornbread with some dried beef, sitting at the small table in her kitchen. The house still bore marks of Takoda everywhere. His tools hung carefully on the wall, the blanket his mother had made draped over a chair, and Victoria watched Vincent's face to see if he would show any discomfort or judgment. But he simply looked around with interest and respect. "You have built a good life here," he said. "This is a fine home." "Takoda and I built it together," Victoria said, testing the words on her tongue. It was the first time she had really talked about her husband to anyone since his death. "He taught me everything about ranching, about living out here. His father was a great hunter, and his mother knew all the plants that could heal or harm. He tried to pass that knowledge on to me." "He sounds like he was a wise teacher," Vincent said. "He was." Victoria looked down at her plate, her appetite suddenly gone. "The missionaries who raised me, they taught me to read and write, taught me about God and Scripture. But Takoda taught me how to really live, how to see the world as something beautiful and sacred instead of just something to survive." "You must miss him terribly." The simple statement, offered without pity or platitude, broke something open inside Victoria. "Every single day," she whispered. "And I am so angry at him for leaving me. I know that is not fair, that he did not choose to die, but I am angry anyway." Angry at him, angry at God, angry at the whole world. "Grief is not fair," Vincent said quietly. "And anger is part of it. My mother died when I was 18 and I was furious for months. Angry at her for dying, angry at my father for not being able to save her, angry at myself for not being a better son while she was alive." Victoria looked up, meeting his eyes. "How did you get past it?" "I am not sure I ever completely did," Vincent admitted. "But eventually the anger faded enough that I could remember the good things without it hurting quite so much. And I learned that shutting everyone out only made it worse. Connection is what keeps us human, even when it feels safer to be alone." His words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Victoria felt exposed, like he could see right through all her defenses to the terrified, grieving woman underneath. But instead of feeling threatened, she felt oddly relieved. It was exhausting to maintain those walls all the time. "I do not know if I can do that," she said honestly. "Trust people again, let anyone close." "You are doing it right now," Vincent pointed out gently. "You let me stay for supper, that is a start." They finished the meal in companionable silence, and when Vincent left that evening, Victoria stood on her porch and watched him ride away under a sky full of stars. For the first time since Takoda died, the silence of the house did not feel quite so suffocating. Summer arrived with blazing heat that turned the landscape golden and harsh. The cattle needed constant attention to ensure they had enough water and good grazing. Vincent continued his regular visits, and gradually their conversations deepened. He told her about his childhood in Texas, how he had learned to work cattle from his father and had been drifting from ranch to ranch since his mother's death. She told him about the missionaries, about the strange in-between existence of being raised white but never quite belonging, and how Takoda had been the first person to make her feel truly accepted. "The townsfolk hate me," she said one afternoon as they worked together to brand some calves. "They hated me when I married Takoda, and they hate me even more now that I am alone. They think I disgraced myself, marrying an Apache." "Their hatred says more about them than it does about you," Vincent said. He held the calf steady while Victoria applied the brand, quick and efficient. "Love is not something to be ashamed of, no matter who you love. That is easy to say when you are not the one people spit at in the street." "You are right," Vincent acknowledged. "I cannot understand what that is like." But I can tell you that anyone with eyes can see that you and Takoda had something real and valuable. That is worth more than all the narrow-minded opinions in the world." Victoria released the calf and stood up, wiping sweat from her forehead. "Why do you keep coming here, Vincent? Really? You could make your life much easier by staying away from the Apache widow." Vincent met her eyes steadily. "Because I like you, Victoria. I like your strength and your honesty. I like the way you do not give up even when things are hard. And I think you deserve to have someone around who sees you for who you really are, not what ignorant people say you are." The words settled over her like a warm blanket, comforting and terrifying all at once. She realized in that moment that Vincent's persistence had worked. Despite all her resistance, despite her determination to stay closed off, he had somehow become important to her. She looked forward to his visits, felt lighter when he was around, and the thought of him stopping his visits left her feeling hollow. But with that realization came fear. Caring about someone meant opening herself up to loss again, and she was not sure she could survive that kind of pain a second time. "I am not ready," she blurted out, even though he had not asked her for anything. Vincent tilted his head, studying her with those calm eyes. "Ready for what?" "For whatever this is becoming." She gestured between them helplessly. "I see the way you look at me sometimes, and I feel something too, but I cannot. I am not ready to risk my heart again." "Victoria," Vincent said gently, "I am not asking you to risk anything. I am just asking to be your friend. Whatever else might or might not happen, that is for some other day. Right now, all I want is to help you with your ranch and maybe share a meal sometimes. Can you accept that?" She wanted to say no, wanted to send him away before things got more complicated. But she was tired of being alone, tired of carrying everything by herself. And the truth was that Vincent had already become part of her life, whether she had intended it or not. "Yes," she said finally, "I can accept that." The summer progressed and their friendship deepened. Vincent taught her some new tricks for working cattle that he had learned in Texas. She showed him how to identify edible and medicinal plants the way Takoda had taught her. They worked side by side during the long, hot days, and sometimes Vincent would stay for supper, and they would sit on her porch as the sun went down and talk about everything and nothing. Victoria found herself laughing again, something she had not done since Takoda died. Vincent had a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard, and he could find amusement in the small absurdities of ranch life. When one of her chickens developed an inexplicable attachment to Vincent's horse and kept trying to roost on the poor animal's back, they both laughed until tears streamed down their faces. But there were hard days too. Days when grief would crash over Victoria without warning, leaving her raw and aching. Days when she would find something of Takoda's, a shirt he had worn or a tool he had made, and the loss would be so fresh it felt like it had happened yesterday instead of months ago. Vincent learned to recognize those days. He would not try to cheer her up or tell her it would be okay. He would just be present, working quietly nearby, letting her know she was not alone even in her pain. And somehow that helped more than any words could have. In July, trouble came to Victoria's ranch in the form of land speculators. 3 men rode up one sweltering afternoon, led by a slick-looking character in a suit that was far too fine for the dusty territory. They claimed to represent a mining company that wanted to purchase her land, said they had reason to believe there might be copper deposits on her property. "This land is not for sale," Victoria said firmly, standing on her porch with her rifle in hand. "Now, madam, be reasonable," the suited man said, his smile not reaching his eyes. "We are prepared to make you a generous offer. A woman alone out here, it is dangerous. You would be better off in town with the money from this sale." "I said no. Now get off my property." The man's smile faded. "You are making a mistake. This land will be ours one way or another. Best to take the money while it is being offered." "Was that a threat?" Victoria asked, raising the rifle slightly. "Just a statement of fact, madam. Land has a way of changing hands out here. Accidents happen." They rode off, but Victoria stood on her porch for a long time after they disappeared, her hands shaking slightly on the rifle. She was not naive. She knew that women alone, especially women like her who existed outside the protection of white society's rules, were vulnerable. Those men could cause her all kinds of trouble, and the law would likely do nothing to help her. When Vincent arrived the next day for his regular visit, Victoria told him what had happened. His jaw tightened as she spoke, and she saw anger flash in his eyes. "They have no right to threaten you," he said. "Right does not matter much out here," Victoria said bitterly. "They want my land and I am an easy target." Vincent was quiet for a moment, clearly thinking. Then he said, "What if you were not alone? What if it was known that this land had someone to protect it, someone those men could not easily intimidate?" "What are you suggesting?" "Let me move my things here," Vincent said. "I will stay in the barn, keep my own space." "But if people think you have a ranch hand, or even better, if they think there might be more between us, those speculators might think twice about causing trouble." Victoria's heart started beating faster. "That would ruin your reputation. People would talk." "Let them talk," Vincent said firmly. "Your safety is more important than gossip. And honestly, Victoria, I think we both know there is more than friendship growing between us, even if neither of us is quite ready to name it yet." She could not deny it. Over the past months, her feelings for Vincent had grown from reluctant acceptance to genuine affection, to something deeper and more complicated. She thought about him when he was not around, felt warm when she saw him riding up the drive, found herself noticing the way his hands moved when he worked or the sound of his laugh. But admitting those feelings, acting on them, felt like a betrayal of Takoda's memory. "I do not know if I can," she whispered. Vincent stepped closer, not touching her but near enough that she could feel the warmth of his presence. "Victoria, loving me would not mean you stopped loving Takoda. The heart has room for more than one person. He was your husband and you honored that marriage with your whole soul. But he is gone and you are still here, still alive. Do you think he would want you to be alone and unhappy forever?" Tears spilled down Victoria's cheeks. "He would hate it," she admitted. "Takoda believed in living fully, in embracing joy whenever you could find it. He would want me to be happy." "Then let yourself be happy," Vincent said gently. "Or at least let yourself be open to the possibility of happiness. I am not asking you to marry me tomorrow. I am just asking to stay close, to help protect what is yours, and to see where this connection between us might lead." Victoria wiped her tears away and looked at this man who had been so patient, so persistent, so gentle in his pursuit of her trust. She had fought against caring for him, fought against the possibility of loving again, but Vincent had worn down her defenses with simple kindness and steady presence. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to stop fighting. "All right," she said. "You can move your things here. But you keep your own space in the barn and we take this slow." Vincent's smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. "Slow is good. Slow works just fine for me." He moved his belongings the next day, setting up a comfortable space in the barn with his bedroll and his few possessions. True to his word, he maintained clear boundaries, never pushing for more than Victoria was ready to give. But his presence on the ranch changed everything. Victoria felt safer knowing he was there, and the work became lighter with two sets of hands sharing it. Word spread quickly in Georgetown that Victoria Foster had taken on a ranch hand, and the speculation about the nature of their relationship was immediate and intense. When Victoria went to town for supplies the following week, she could feel eyes on her everywhere, hear the whispers that followed in her wake. Shameless, taking up with another man so soon after her husband died. At least this one is white. Maybe she has learned her lesson. No decent woman would live alone with a man like that. Victoria kept her head high and her expression neutral as she purchased what she needed and loaded it into her wagon. She was climbing up to the driver's seat when a rough hand grabbed her arm, spinning her around. It was one of the land speculators from before, the younger of the three men, his breath reeking of whiskey even though it was barely noon. "You think bringing in some cowboy is going to scare us off? You are going to sell us that land one way or another." "Let go of me," Victoria said coldly, trying to pull her arm free. "Or what? You will have your Apache ghosts protect you. Your people are nearly gone in case you have not noticed. Nobody cares what happens to you." "I care," said a calm voice behind them, and suddenly Vincent was there, his hand on the man's wrist, applying just enough pressure to make him release Victoria immediately. "And I suggest you step away from the lady right now." The speculator stumbled back, rubbing his wrist and glaring. "This is not your business, cowboy." "Anything concerning Victoria is my business," Vincent said evenly. His tone was not threatening, but there was steel underneath the quiet words. "And I am going to make this very clear, so there is no confusion. That land is not for sale. Any further attempts to intimidate or threaten will be met with appropriate response. Are we understood? The company I work for has powerful friends," the speculator blustered. "You are making a big mistake." "The only mistake being made here is yours," Vincent said. "Now I suggest you leave before this conversation becomes less polite." The speculator looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Vincent's stance or expression must have convinced him otherwise. He backed away, muttering threats under his breath, and finally staggered off down the street. Victoria realized she was shaking, adrenaline coursing through her veins. Vincent touched her elbow gently, steadying her. "Are you all right?" "Yes," she managed. "Thank you." "Always," he said simply. Then, louder, so that the various townspeople watching the scene could hear. "Let us get you home, darling." The endearment was clearly for show, to reinforce the impression that they were together and Victoria was under his protection. But the words sent a flutter through Victoria's stomach nonetheless. They rode back to the ranch in silence, but it was not an uncomfortable silence. It was the silence of two people who understood each other, who did not need words to communicate. That evening, after the chores were done and they had eaten supper together, Victoria found herself reluctant to have Vincent retreat to the barn. They were sitting on the porch watching the stars emerge, and the thought of being alone in the house suddenly felt unbearable. "Stay a while longer," she said softly. "Please." Vincent settled back into his chair. "I am not going anywhere." They sat in comfortable quiet for a time, listening to the night sounds of the desert, the distant coyotes and the rustle of small creatures in the brush. Finally, Victoria said, "I am scared." "Of those men, of everything," she admitted. "Of losing this land that Takoda and I built together, of being alone, of not being alone, of caring about you and then losing you too." Vincent reached over and took her hand, his calloused fingers warm and strong around hers. "Fear is reasonable. Life does not come with guarantees. But Victoria, if you let fear make all your decisions, you will never really live. You will just survive, and there is a big difference." "Takoda used to say something similar," Victoria said. "He said that every day was a gift, and we honor those gifts by living them fully, not by hiding from them." He was a smart man. Victoria squeezed Vincent's hand, taking comfort in the solid reality of his presence. "I think I am ready to stop hiding now, or at least to try." That is all anyone can do, Vincent said. Just try. Over the following weeks, Victoria and Vincent's relationship shifted in small but significant ways. They still maintained separate sleeping arrangements, but they spent more time together in the evenings, talking or simply enjoying each other's company. Vincent started teaching Victoria to play card games his mother had taught him, and she showed him how to weave simple baskets from willow branches the way Takoda's mother had shown her. The physical distance between them gradually decreased. A hand on the shoulder became normal. Standing close together to look at something was natural. And one evening in August, when they were sitting on the porch after a long day of hard work, Vincent put his arm around Victoria's shoulders and she let herself lean into him, resting her head against his chest and listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Is this all right?" he asked softly. "Yes," Victoria whispered. "This is good." They stayed like that as darkness fell completely, wrapped in each other's presence and the desert silence. Victoria felt something inside her begin to heal, like a wound that had been festering finally getting air and sunlight. The grief for Takoda would always be part of her, but it no longer consumed her entirely. There was room now for other emotions, for the tentative joy she felt in Vincent's company, for the growing hope that maybe life could still hold good things. In September, the land speculators tried a different approach. They went to the territorial authorities, claiming that Victoria's title to the land was questionable because her marriage to Takoda had never been legally recognized. The argument was specious at best, since Victoria had inherited the land from the missionary family that raised her, not from her husband. But the speculators were hoping that a combination of prejudice and legal confusion would be enough to muddy the waters. Vincent rode into Georgetown and returned with a lawyer, a sharp-eyed man named Peter Carlson who had a reputation for being honest and competent. He reviewed Victoria's papers carefully, then nodded with satisfaction. "Your claim is solid," he said. "The land was deeded to you before your marriage, and there is no legal basis for challenging your ownership. I will file the appropriate documents and make it clear that any further harassment will result in legal action against this mining company." The speculators backed off after that, clearly deciding that Victoria was more trouble than she was worth. But the whole ordeal had rattled her, reminded her of how precarious her position was as a woman alone, as someone who existed outside the social structures that protected most people. "I hate feeling so vulnerable," she told Vincent one evening. They were in the barn, tending to one of the horses that had developed a minor injury. "I hate that men like that can come along and threaten everything I have worked for, everything Takoda and I built." "You are not vulnerable," Vincent said firmly. "You are one of the strongest people I have ever met. But strength does not mean doing everything alone. It is okay to let other people help carry the load." Victoria looked at him across the horse's back, this man who had shown up in her life like an unexpected gift, and refused to leave no matter how hard she tried to push him away. "You have done more than help carry the load. You have given me back something I thought I lost forever." "What is that?" "Hope," Victoria said simply, "and the belief that good things are still possible." Vincent came around the horse to stand in front of her, his eyes searching her face. "Good things are possible, Victoria, if you are willing to reach out and take them." She knew what he was asking, what he had been patiently waiting for all these months. Her heart was pounding, but for once it was not from fear. It was anticipation, the thrill of taking a leap into the unknown. "I am willing," she whispered. Vincent cupped her face in his hands, his touch infinitely gentle, giving her every opportunity to pull away. When she did not, when instead she leaned into his touch, he smiled. "Can I kiss you?" "Yes." The kiss was soft and sweet, nothing rushed or demanding. It tasted like promise and new beginnings, like the first rain after a long drought. Victoria felt something unlock inside her, some final barrier crumbling away, and when they pulled apart she was crying. But these were good tears, healing tears. "I love you," Vincent said, the words simple and true. "I have loved you for months now, but I was waiting for you to be ready to hear it." "I love you too," Victoria said, and speaking the words aloud felt like stepping into sunlight after a long darkness. "I did not think I could love again, did not think I had any love left to give, but you showed me that the heart can hold more than we think possible." They held each other in the quiet barn, surrounded by the gentle sounds of the horses and the settling ranch. Victoria felt Takoda's presence there too, not as a ghost but as a blessing, like he was giving his approval to this new chapter of her life. She had loved him with everything she had, and that love had taught her how to be open, how to be vulnerable, how to fully give herself to another person. Those lessons had prepared her to love Vincent, to take the risk of opening her heart again despite the fear of loss. In October, when the fierce heat of summer had given way to cooler days, and the cottonwoods along the creek turned brilliant gold, Vincent asked Victoria to marry him. They were riding together to check on cattle in the far pasture, and he reined in his horse at the top of a rise that overlooked the entire valley. "This land is beautiful," he said, "but it is not the land I want to spend my life with. It is you, Victoria. Every day with you is a gift, and I want to have as many of those days as possible. Will you marry me?" Victoria looked out over the valley, over the land she and Takoda had loved, the place where she had known her deepest grief and was now finding her way back to joy. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." They were married in November by a circuit judge who came through Georgetown once a month. The ceremony was simple, held at the ranch with just a few witnesses. Peter Carlson, the lawyer, stood up for Vincent. A woman named Sarah Chen, who ran a boarding house in town, and who had always been kind to Victoria even when others shunned her, stood up for Victoria. The foreman from the Triple Star Ranch came too, along with a few of the cowboys Vincent had worked with, men who respected him and were willing to show respect to his chosen bride regardless of her past. The townsfolk of Georgetown had plenty to say about the marriage, of course. A widow remarrying so quickly was scandalous enough, but an Apache widow marrying a white cowboy less than a year after her first husband's death was the subject of endless gossip. Victoria and Vincent both ignored it. They had each other, they had the ranch, and they had the knowledge that their love was real and good, regardless of what small-minded people might say. The first months of their marriage were a time of adjustment and discovery. They had to learn each other's habits and rhythms in the intimate space of sharing a home. Vincent was neat and organized, while Victoria had a tendency to leave projects scattered around the house. Vincent liked to wake up early, while Victoria had always been more of a night person. But they worked through these small differences with patience and humor, learning to accommodate each other's quirks. The physical side of their marriage was a revelation for Victoria. She had loved Takoda, and their physical connection had been good and natural. But with Vincent, there was a different energy, a sense of coming home to something she had not known she was missing. He was gentle and patient, always attentive to her needs, and as she grew more comfortable with him, their intimacy deepened into something powerful and beautiful. Winter came to the Arizona territory, cold nights and occasional snow that dusted the red rocks white. Vincent and Victoria worked side by side through the challenges of the season, keeping the cattle fed and the water from freezing. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, Vincent reading aloud from books while Victoria mended clothes or worked on her basket weaving. It was a peaceful, contented existence, the kind of domestic happiness that Victoria had thought was lost to her forever. In January, Victoria began to feel ill in the mornings. At first, she thought it was something she ate, but when it persisted for more than a week, a different possibility occurred to her. She rode to Georgetown to see the doctor, a gruff older man who examined her and confirmed what she already suspected. "You are going to have a baby, Mrs. Hayes. I would say you are about 8 weeks along, so you can expect the little one sometime in late summer." Victoria rode home in a daze of emotions. Joy, terror, excitement, and grief all swirled together inside her. She had wanted children with Dakota, but it had never happened, and she had assumed that maybe she could not have babies. Now, at 25 years old, she was going to be a mother. But instead of sharing this news with Dakota, she would be sharing it with Vincent. When she arrived home, Vincent was working in the barn. He took one look at her face and set down his tools, coming to her immediately. "What is wrong? What did the doctor say?" "I am pregnant," Victoria blurted out. "We are going to have a baby." For a moment, Vincent just stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then a huge smile broke across his face and he let out a whoop of joy, picking her up and spinning her around. "A baby, Victoria, this is wonderful." She clung to him, laughing and crying at the same time. "I am scared. I do not know how to be a mother." "Nobody knows how to be a parent until they do it," Vincent said, setting her down gently but keeping his arms around her. "But we will figure it out together. We make a good team, you and I. We can handle this." His confidence helped settle her nerves, and over the following weeks, Victoria allowed herself to be excited about the baby. Vincent was endlessly solicitous, trying to take on more of the heavy ranch work so she would not strain herself. Victoria appreciated his concern but also insisted on continuing to do her share. She was pregnant, not helpless. As winter turned to spring, Victoria's belly began to round with the growing baby. She felt the first flutters of movement in March, a sensation that filled her with wonder. This was a new life, created from the love she shared with Vincent, and it felt like a symbol of hope and renewal. But grief still had a place in her heart. There were days when she would think about how Dakota would have loved to be a father, how he would have been gentle and wise with a child. She found herself talking to his memory sometimes, telling him about the baby, about her new life with Vincent. It helped to acknowledge that loving Vincent and building a future with him did not erase the past she had shared with Dakota. Both loves were real, both were important, and she could hold space for both. Vincent never showed any jealousy or discomfort when Victoria talked about Dakota. He seemed to understand that her first husband would always be part of who she was, and he respected that history. It was one of the many reasons Victoria loved him, this capacity for understanding and acceptance without insecurity. In April, a rider came to the ranch with unexpected news. He was a young Apache man, maybe 18 or 19 years old, and he approached cautiously, clearly unsure of his welcome. "I am looking for the woman who was married to Dakota," he said in heavily accented English. "I am his cousin, Running Deer. My mother sent me to find you." Victoria's heart clenched. "I am Victoria. I was Dakota's wife." "My mother wishes to meet you," Running Deer said. "She could not come before because our people are being moved to the reservation and it has been difficult. But she wants you to know that Dakota's family honors the love you shared, and that you will always be family to us." Tears streamed down Victoria's face. She had thought that Dakota's family might blame her for his death, or resent that he married outside his people. To hear that they wanted to welcome her was overwhelming. "I would very much like to meet your mother. Please tell her that." Running Deer's eyes dropped to her rounded belly. "You carry a child." "Yes. My new husband and I are expecting a baby in late summer." Something complicated crossed the young man's face, but he simply nodded. Takoda would be glad that you have found happiness again. He would not want you to mourn forever. The meeting with Takoda's family happened 2 weeks later. Running Deer returned to guide Victoria and Vincent to a place near the reservation where several Apache families had gathered. It was a risk for them to leave the designated area, but they considered it important enough to take that risk. Takoda's mother was a weathered woman with kind eyes and hands that had seen decades of hard work. She embraced Victoria like a daughter, speaking in a mixture of Apache and broken English while Running Deer translated. She told stories about Takoda as a child, about his gentle nature and his curiosity about the world. She cried when Victoria told her about his final days, but she also smiled when Victoria shared memories of their time together. "He chose well," Takoda's mother said through Running Deer. "You honored him with your love, and you honor him still by living fully. This is what he would want." She gave Victoria a beautiful necklace made of turquoise and silver, something that had belonged to Takoda's grandmother. "For the baby," she said. "So they will know they come from two worlds, and that both worlds hold beauty." The meeting was bittersweet, a reminder of everything Victoria had lost, but also a confirmation that love transcends boundaries of culture and time. She left with a sense of peace she had not known she needed, feeling like she had received a blessing from Takoda's family to move forward with her new life. Vincent had stood quietly during most of the meeting, respectful of the family's grief and their connection to Victoria. But afterward, as they rode home, he reached over and took her hand. "That was important," he said. "I am glad you got to meet them." "Thank you for understanding," Victoria said. "Thank you for never making me feel like I have to choose between honoring my past and building our future." "Those things are not separate," Vincent said. "The past made you who you are, and I love who you are. All of it, not just the parts that started when I came into your life." It was one of many moments when Victoria felt grateful for the man she had married, for his wisdom and his generous heart. The baby came in August, during a rare summer thunderstorm that broke the oppressive heat with rain and lightning. The labor was long and difficult, attended by Sarah Chen from the boarding house who had experience with birthing babies. Vincent stayed nearby, pacing and anxious, appearing at the bedroom door every time Victoria cried out. When the baby finally arrived, a healthy boy with a shock of dark hair and lungs that announced his presence to the world, Vincent wept openly. He held his son with trembling hands, looking at the tiny face with an expression of absolute awe. "He is perfect," Vincent whispered. "Victoria, he is absolutely perfect." They named him Thomas, after Vincent's father, with the middle name of Takoda to honor the man whose love had taught Victoria how to open her heart. Thomas Takoda Hayes was welcomed into the world with love from two parents who had both known deep loss and had found each other in the aftermath of grief. The first months of parenthood were exhausting and wonderful. Thomas was a demanding baby who did not sleep much, and Victoria and Vincent took turns walking the floor with him at night, singing soft songs and rocking him until he finally settled. The ranch work still had to be done, so they learned to function on little sleep, trading off responsibilities and supporting each other through the challenging days. But there was also profound joy. Thomas's first smile, the way his tiny hand would grasp Vincent's finger, the soft sounds he made when he was content. Victoria would sometimes nurse him late at night and feel overwhelmed by the magnitude of love she felt for this small person, this perfect combination of her and Vincent. When Thomas was 6 months old, Vincent came home one day with news. The Triple Star is looking to sell off some of their land. There is a parcel adjacent to ours that would almost double our grazing area. I talked to the owner, and he is willing to give us a fair price if we are interested." Victoria considered it carefully. The extra land would mean they could run more cattle, build a more prosperous operation. It would also mean more work, but they were both willing to work hard. "Let us do it," she said. "Let us build something that will last, something we can pass on to Thomas and any other children we might have." They purchased the land and spent the next year improving it, building new fences and a second water source, slowly growing their herd. The work was hard but satisfying, and Victoria found herself genuinely happy in a way she had not thought possible after Takota's death. She had a partner who loved and respected her, a healthy son who brought her joy every day, and a ranch that was thriving through their combined efforts. In the spring of 1888, Victoria discovered she was pregnant again. This time the news brought less fear and more excitement. She knew what to expect now, and she had confidence in her ability to be a mother. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and in November she gave birth to a daughter they named Vincent Hayes. She had Vincent's blue-green eyes and Victoria's dark hair, and Thomas was fascinated by his new baby sister, wanting to help with everything. The ranch continued to prosper. Vincent had a good eye for cattle and for land management, and Victoria's knowledge of the terrain and its resources, learned from Takota, helped them make smart decisions about how to best use what they had. By 1890, they were running over 100 head of cattle and had hired 2 ranch hands to help with the work. The townsfolk of Georgetown gradually became accustomed to Victoria and Vincent, though there were still some who looked askance at them. But they had built their own community of sorts, a network of people who valued character over prejudice. Sarah Chen remained a close friend. Peter Carlson, the lawyer, would stop by occasionally for supper and conversation. The cowboys who worked for them were loyal and hardworking, drawn by fair wages and decent treatment. Victoria sometimes thought about how far she had come from that hollow, angry woman standing at Takota's grave. The grief had not disappeared entirely, probably never would, but it had been integrated into the larger fabric of her life. She could think of Takota now with fondness and sadness, but without the crushing pain that had once threatened to destroy her. And she had learned that the human heart had an almost infinite capacity for love, that caring for Vincent and building a life with him had not diminished what she felt for Takota, but rather honored it by proving that she was capable of loving deeply and well. On a warm evening in June 1892, Victoria and Vincent sat on their porch watching Thomas, now 4 years old, chase fireflies in the gathering dusk while Lily, almost 3, toddled after him with determined steps. Victoria was pregnant again, due in the fall, and she rested her hand on her rounded belly, feeling the baby kick. "You ever regret it?" Vincent asked quietly. "Choosing this life, choosing me?" Victoria looked at him, at this man who had refused to give up on her even when she had given up on herself. "Never," she said firmly. "You gave me back my life, Vincent. You taught me that I could trust again, that I could open my heart again without being destroyed. I will always love Takota, and I will always be grateful for the time we had together. But you are my present and my future, and I would not change that for anything." Vincent leaned over and kissed her, soft and sweet. "I love you more than I have words to express. You and our children are everything to me." They sat together in the cooling evening, watching their children play, listening to the sounds of the ranch settling down for the night. The cattle lowed softly in the distance. A horse whinnied from the barn. The first stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Victoria thought about faith, about how she had lost it completely in the dark days after Takota's death. She had been so angry at God, at the universe, at the unfairness of losing someone she loved so much. But maybe faith was not about believing that bad things would not happen. Maybe it was about trusting that even after the worst had happened, life could still offer beauty and meaning and love. Maybe it was about staying open to possibility, even when everything in you wanted to close down. Vincent had taught her that. His gentle persistence had worn down her walls. His steady presence had shown her that trust was still possible, that love could still be a source of joy rather than just a precursor to pain. And in learning to love him, she had found her way back to herself, back to a version of Victoria who could embrace life fully instead of just enduring it. Their third child was born in October, another boy they named James. He was a calm baby, easier than Thomas had been, and he fit seamlessly into their growing family. Victoria recovered quickly from the birth, helped by the fact that she now had hired help around the ranch and could afford to take some time to rest. The years flowed by, each one bringing its own challenges and joys. They weathered droughts and harsh winters, celebrated good years when the cattle prices were high, made improvements to the ranch buildings, and watched their children grow. Thomas showed an early aptitude for working with animals and was already helping his father with the horses by the time he was 7. Lily was bright and curious, always asking questions about everything. James was gentle and thoughtful, often found playing quietly by himself or helping his mother in the garden she had planted near the house. In 1895, when Thomas was 7, Lily was 5, and James was 3, Running Deer came to visit again. He was a man now, in his mid-20s, and he brought news that Takota's mother had passed away peacefully in her sleep. Victoria grieved for the kind woman who had welcomed her with such warmth, but she was also grateful that she had gotten to know her, had gotten that blessing and connection to Takota's family. Running Deer stayed for supper, and Victoria introduced him to her children. Thomas was fascinated by the young Apache man, asking endless questions about his life on the reservation. Running Deer was patient with the boy's curiosity, answering honestly about the hardships his people faced, but also about the efforts to maintain their culture and traditions despite everything. Before he left, Running Deer gave Victoria a bundle wrapped in soft leather. "My grandmother, Takota's mother, wanted you to have this. She worked on it for many years, even as her hands grew stiff with age." Inside was a beautiful blanket, woven with intricate patterns in colors that made Victoria catch her breath. It was a masterwork of skill and love, and she knew immediately that it was meant to be passed down through generations. "Tell her family that I will treasure this always," Victoria said, her voice thick with emotion. "And that my children will know where they come from, will know that they carry the heritage of strong, beautiful people in their blood." Running Deer nodded, satisfied, and rode away into the gathering dusk. That night, Victoria spread the blanket out on her bed and traced the patterns with her fingers, thinking about the woman who had made it, about Takota, about all the love and loss that had led her to this moment. Vincent came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "It is beautiful," he said softly. "It is a legacy," Victoria replied, "for our children and their children. A reminder that we are all connected, that love crosses boundaries that men try to create." As the new century approached, the Hayes Ranch became one of the most successful small operations in the territory. They had expanded their land holdings twice more, now running over 200 head of cattle and breeding some of the best horses in the region. They had built a proper barn and a larger house, though Victoria had insisted on keeping the original adobe structure as a guest house, unable to part with the home she and Takota had built together. Thomas grew into a responsible young man who loved the ranch as much as his parents did. Lily surprised everyone by showing an interest in the business side of things, keeping meticulous records of expenses and income. James remained quiet and thoughtful, but he had a gift for understanding the land and the animals that his father said was almost uncanny. In 1899, Victoria gave birth to their fourth and final child, a daughter they named Rose. She came as a surprise, born when Victoria was 38 years old and had assumed her childbearing years were over. Rose was a firecracker from the start, spirited and stubborn and absolutely convinced she could do anything her older siblings could do. Vincent turned 40 that same year, and Victoria was 38. They were no longer the young people who had met in a dusty barnyard 14 years earlier. Their hands bore the calluses and scars of decades of ranch work. Victoria's dark hair had a few threads of silver, and Vincent had laugh lines around his eyes. But they were happy, deeply content in the life they had built together. One evening, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and reds, Victoria said, "I want to do something to honor Takota, something permanent." "What did you have in mind?" Vincent asked. "A school," Victoria said. "There are Apache children on the reservation who do not have access to good education. And there are children in Georgetown whose families cannot afford to send them to the expensive private school. I want to build a school that is open to everyone, regardless of their background or ability to pay." Vincent considered it for a moment, then nodded. "We have the resources to do it, and it is a good way to honor Takota's belief in bringing people together." They spent the next 2 years planning and building the school, a sturdy structure halfway between the reservation and Georgetown, positioned so that it was accessible to children from both communities. They hired a teacher from back east, a young woman named Margaret Sinclair who believed passionately in education for all children. The school opened in the fall of 1901, and despite some grumbling from the more prejudiced citizens of Georgetown, it filled quickly. Children of miners and ranchers sat alongside Apache children, all learning to read and write and do mathematics together. Victoria volunteered there regularly, teaching the older children about the medicinal plants that grew in the area, sharing the knowledge that Takota had passed on to her. The school became Victoria's pride and joy, a concrete expression of the values she and Takota had shared, now brought to life with Vincent's support. It was proof that love and faith could create something lasting and meaningful, that grief did not have to be the end of the story. As the years passed, Victoria watched her children grow into adults. Thomas married a rancher's daughter from a neighboring spread, and they built a house on the portion of the Hayes ranch that would eventually become his inheritance. Lily, defying convention, went to business school in Tucson and came back with ideas for expanding the ranch's operations. James remained at home, content to work the land alongside his father. And Rose, the youngest, showed every sign of being as independent and strong-willed as her mother. In 1910, when Victoria was 49 years old and Vincent was 51, they became grandparents for the first time. Thomas and his wife had a son they named Vincent, after his grandfather, and the sight of Vincent holding his tiny namesake brought tears to Victoria's eyes. The circle of life continued, generation following generation, each adding their own chapter to the family story. One summer evening, Victoria found herself standing at Takota's grave again. She had not visited in several years, had not felt the need to as acutely as she once had. But something had drawn her there, a desire to come full circle, to see how far she had traveled from that broken, angry woman who had stood in this same spot so many years ago, The grave was well tended. She and Vincent made sure of that, keeping it clear of weeds and leaving offerings of flowers and sweet grass. She stood there in the fading light and spoke aloud, something she had not done in a long time. "I hope I made you proud, Takoda. I hope you know that I have lived fully, the way you always wanted me to. I found love again, but I never forgot you. You are in everything I do, in the way I see the world, in the values I passed on to our children. Yes, our children. Thomas and Lily and James and Rose, they are yours too in a way, because they exist because you taught me how to love, how to be open, how to be strong." She paused, feeling the evening breeze ruffle her hair. "Vincent has been so good to me. He gave me back my faith, my ability to trust, my hope for the future. I think you would like him. I think you would approve of the life we have built, and I think you are at peace wherever you are, knowing that I am happy." "I am glad to hear it," said Vincent's voice behind her, and she turned to find him standing a respectful distance away. "I hope I am not intruding." "Never," Victoria said, reaching out her hand to him. He came to stand beside her, looking down at the grave marker. "I was just telling Takoda about our life, about the children and the grandchildren and the school." "He would be proud of all of it," Vincent said. "Especially the school. That is a real legacy, Victoria, something that will last long after we are gone." They stood together in the gathering darkness, Victoria leaning against Vincent's solid warmth, both of them honoring the man who had been Victoria's first love and whose death had, in a roundabout way, brought them together. "I never thought I could be this happy again," Victoria said softly. "That day you first rode onto my land, I wanted nothing more than to be left alone to wallow in my grief. And you just kept coming back, kept being patient and kind until I finally let my guard down." "Best decision I ever made," Vincent said, kissing the top of her head. "You are the strongest, most remarkable woman I have ever known, Victoria Hayes. Loving you has been the greatest privilege of my life." They walked back to their ranch hand in hand, across the land they had built their life on, passing the school that stood as a testament to their shared values. Smoke rose from the chimney of their house, where Lily was cooking supper and Rose was probably supposed to be helping, but was more likely reading a book somewhere. James would be finishing up the evening chores, and Thomas and his family would be joining them soon for the weekly family dinner they always shared. This was her life now, rich and full and so different from anything she could have imagined during those dark months after Takoda's death. The grief was still there, would always be there, but it had been woven into the larger tapestry of her life rather than consuming it entirely. She had learned that the human heart had an almost infinite capacity for love, that you could honor the dead while fully embracing life. That loss did not have to define you. Vincent had taught her all of that with his gentle persistence, his steady presence, his unwavering faith in her even when she had no faith in herself. He had shown her that trust was still possible, that opening your heart again was not a betrayal, but an affirmation, that love was always worth the risk. As they reached the house and heard the happy chaos of their family inside, Victoria paused for one last look back toward the mountains where the sun was setting in a blaze of color. Somewhere out there was Takoda's grave, and somewhere beyond that was everything they had been, everything they had shared. But here, in this place, with this man and this family, was everything she had become, everything she was still becoming. "Thank you," she whispered, though she was not entirely sure if she was thanking Takoda for teaching her how to love, or Vincent for teaching her how to love again, or the universe for giving her both of them. Maybe it did not matter. Maybe gratitude did not need a specific target, just an open heart willing to receive the gifts life offered. Vincent squeezed her hand gently, and together they walked into their home, into the warmth and light and love that filled it. The door closed behind them, but it was not an ending. It was simply the closing of another chapter in a story that would continue through their children and grandchildren, through the school that bore silent witness to values that transcended prejudice, through the land they had nurtured, and that would outlast them all. Victoria Foster Hayes had lost all faith once, had believed that love was a cruel trick and life was nothing but suffering. But a cowboy's gentle persistence had taught her otherwise. Vincent had shown her that faith was not about avoiding pain, but about trusting that beauty and meaning could exist alongside sorrow. He had taught her to open her heart again, to risk love again, to believe in possibility again. And in doing so, he had given her back her life. The years continued to unfold in their gentle rhythm. Victoria and Vincent grew older together, their bodies slowing but their connection only deepening with time. They celebrated birthdays and holidays surrounded by an ever-growing family. They mourned losses when friends passed away, including Sarah Chen, who left Victoria her recipe book, and a note saying that Victoria had been one of the best friends she ever had. The school thrived and expanded, eventually adding a second building to accommodate all the children who wanted to attend. Margaret Sinclair, the teacher they had hired, became like family, joining them for holidays and eventually marrying James Hayes in a ceremony that brought tears to everyone's eyes. Thomas and his wife had 3 more children after young Vincent, giving Victoria and Vincent a total of 4 grandchildren from that line. Lily never married, but she became a successful businesswoman who helped modernize the ranch's operations and was respected throughout the territory for her sharp mind and fair dealing. James and Margaret had twin girls who were as different as night and day but equally beloved. Rose, true to her independent nature, became a teacher at the school and fought tirelessly for educational opportunities for all children regardless of background. On a crisp autumn evening in 1925, Vincent Hayes passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 76. He had lived a full life, had loved deeply and been loved in return, had built something lasting and good. Victoria, now 64 years old, held his hand as he took his final breath, whispering that she loved him and would see him again someday. The grief was intense but different from what she had experienced when Takota died. She was older now, and she understood that death was part of life's natural rhythm. She mourned Vincent deeply, missed him terribly, but she did not lose faith this time. She knew, with absolute certainty, that love persisted beyond death, that the connections we forge continue to matter even after we are separated by the veil between worlds. Victoria lived for another 7 years after Vincent's death, surrounded by her children and grandchildren. She spent her days working in her garden, volunteering at the school, and telling stories about both Takota and Vincent to the younger generations. She made sure they understood that she had been blessed to love 2 extraordinary men, that both had shaped who she was and how she moved through the world. She was buried between them when she finally passed in 1932 at the age of 71, Takota on one side and Vincent on the other. The headstones stood together in the small cemetery outside Georgetown, a physical manifestation of the truth that love is not limited, that the heart can hold multiple truths simultaneously, that grief and joy can coexist, and that faith, once lost, can be found again through the patient, persistent kindness of someone who believes in you. The school Victoria and Vincent had founded continued to operate for decades, educating generations of children and standing as a testament to their belief in unity and understanding. The ranch was divided among their children but remained in the family, worked by great-great-grandchildren who heard stories about the Apache widow and the cowboy who taught her to trust again. Their love story became part of the region's history, passed down through the generations as a reminder that prejudice can be overcome, that grief does not have to be the end, and that persistent gentleness can heal even the most broken hearts. It was a story about loss and renewal, about the courage it takes to open yourself to love after devastation, about the power of one person's steady presence to change everything. Victoria Foster Hayes had started as a woman who believed in nothing, who had lost all faith in goodness and meaning and love. But she ended as a woman who understood that faith is not about certainty, but about trust, not about avoiding pain, but about believing that life holds beauty worth experiencing despite the inevitable losses. Vincent Hayes, with his gentle persistence and unwavering kindness, had given her that gift, had shown her that the story was not over, that new chapters could be written even after it seemed like everything had ended. And in the end, their story became one of hope, proof that love can heal, that persistence pays off, and that the human heart has an infinite capacity for renewal. It was a story worthy of the wild, beautiful, harsh, and generous land they called home, the Arizona Territory in the waning days of the Old West, when anything seemed possible and second chances were still available to those brave enough to reach for them. The ranch house still stood decades later, weathered but solid, filled with the echoes of laughter and conversation, of children growing up and love declared, of ordinary moments made extraordinary by the people who lived them. The school building remained too, its walls holding the dreams and aspirations of countless students who found opportunity there, who learned that education and understanding could bridge divides that seemed insurmountable. And in the small cemetery on the hill, 3 headstones stood together under the vast Arizona sky, marking the resting places of 3 people whose lives had been woven together by love and loss, by faith lost and faith regained, by the simple truth that sometimes the best thing we can do for each other is to show up, be patient, and refuse to give up on someone even when they have given up on themselves. That was the legacy of Victoria Foster Hayes and Vincent Hayes and Takota, whose name meant friend to everyone. They lived, they loved, they suffered, and they endured. And in doing so, they proved that the human spirit is capable of remarkable resilience, that the heart can be broken and mended and broken again and still find the courage to love, and that faith, once lost in the depths of grief, can be slowly, gently, persistently restored by someone who sees your worth even when you cannot see it yourself. Their story ended not with tragedy but with triumph, not with loss but with legacy, not with despair but with hope that continued to ripple outward through generations, touching lives they would never know, inspiring hearts they would never meet, and proving that love, in all its forms, is the most powerful force in the universe, capable of healing the deepest wounds and restoring even the most shattered faith.